Now, speaking of the said Brad Wall, Premier Wall, off at the Premier's Conference in Charlottetown, had a lot of people talking around the country with his comments to the Globe and Mail. You remember we did a bit on this yesterday? If we cannot get improvements on the front of Ontario, having this 10% competitive advantage on bidding, Ontario using local knowledge parts in their tendering, Saskatchewan's going to have to do something. We're not going to be Boy Scouts anymore. Premier Brad Wall joins us now. Premier, I know I'm pulling you out of the meetings. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, John.
Tell me about what the trade situation looks like now with Ontario.
Well, there's obviously some challenges. The Infrastructure Ontario organization, which is an arm of their government, which coordinates their procurement for construction, does have this local preference 10% advantage they give to companies, obviously, in that province. And that's a trade barrier. They actually had to set Infrastructure Ontario up outside of the reach of the current agreement on internal trade, which is sort of the weak trade agreement that currently exists between the provinces, but it's the one that exists. So they moved outside of that to create it to allow for this to happen. That's a problem. Obviously, that's a disadvantage for Saskatchewan companies that want to bid on Ontario projects. And we're going to be asking Ontario to fix that, to stop doing that. And actually, we're asking the rest of the provinces to craft what we think is working in something like that is working in the West, in the U.S. partnership for the country, a brand new Canada free trade zone and a stronger trade agreement between the provinces.
If you have, and we've had in this province in the last several years, some of the biggest infrastructure projects in our history, we've had big buildings being built, big freeways, big interchanges, and you're hearing, for example, the steel industry and others saying, they're having this competition problem. Does this now begin to look like you've got to take measures to single out Ontario companies if they're going to come and take our work when we can't do theirs?
We can't rule that out, John. We're not going to be Boy Scouts about this. We need to defend our industry to make sure they operate on a level playing field. There's an expectation that we have open procurement in Saskatchewan for big projects like the Regina Bypass, like the commuter bridge in Saskatoon, the potential bridge for Prince Albert. These are large projects. The P3s we're doing have already attracted companies from around the world who are bidding, and that's good because it can make sure the price stays low. But if we're offering open procurement to the world and Ontario, we would have no less expectation that the province of Ontario would do the same thing. And so we won't rule anything out. We're going to try to work it out and see these sorts of barriers eliminated and have stronger free trade between the provinces, which, it's 2014. I think most Canadians are surprised that we have, in many cases, greater barriers between provinces than we do between a province, a company in Saskatchewan that wants to do business in the United States or now Europe, where we have a free trade agreement.
Premier Brad Wall, so is there any appetite then to have the agreement on internal trade modified in the wake of your colleague Premier Wynne, who has been unapologetic about this Ontario policy?
Well, we sure hope that Ontario, we're going to be dealing with this later today. This is on the agenda at the Premier's meeting, and so we're going to be raising it. I think there is momentum from other jurisdictions. Even today, the U.S. partnership premiers, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC, confirmed that we're going to go a little bit further with our agreement. We're going to look at what we'd agreed to be exceptions from agreement to see if there's some common sense changes we can make. The interesting example of a first aid kit manufacturer who has to build basically 10 different first aid kits because there's 10 different rules in 10 different provinces. We're going to at least clear those kinds of things up in the New West and keep demonstrating that free trade between the provinces is common sense and can work. And we hope that example will be, powerful for other provinces. Protectionism doesn't work, John. We have Thomas Mulcair, the leader of the NDP, saying getting rid of internal trade barriers is right. We have the provincial NDP in Saskatchewan who have now support free trade notionally, I think. And so we understand that the argument's over. Freer trade is not perfect, but it is better than protectionism for an economy. And I hope, I have to believe that Ontario is going to, not ignore history and the evolution of this debate.
Premier Brad Wall, okay, it would be unfair for me not to ask you this. One of our listeners was just on a tear, and it's getting a lot of action now at 306. Healthcare infrastructure. There's some media trending today, whether it's long-term care, nursing care, this kind of thing. Is your government doing enough to rebuild infrastructure that clearly needs an upgrade?
Well, we can always do more, but we have made record investments in healthcare infrastructure. We're the government that's, frankly, early on after the election in 07, highlighted 13 long-term care replacements, long-term care home replacements around the province, immediately moved on that. Large projects in my hometown now underway that were needed, frankly, when the NDP were in power. Moose Jaw, new hospital. We're going to get the Children's Hospital done. We do have the plans for new long-term care around the province. Now, could there be more? Absolutely. We also need, John, to keep the Saskatchewan advantage at the heart of which is fiscal responsibility. So we are going to continue to make record investments in healthcare infrastructure, but we need to make sure we're balancing the budget and where we can, paying down debt and keeping our economy competitive so that, in fact, the economy can sustain the requirement for more investment in infrastructure. And, as for the stadium, John, there will never be a time in the history of our province where there isn't a road that needs to be done or a school or a hospital versus a recreational facility. So we've simply said, look, we're going to support the stadium like we have the new arena in Moose Jaw, like we have the new arena in Estevan, that same percentage, and get this done because, this is a recreational complex, a sporting complex. It is needed. And we're going to treat it the same as all of the others.
Premier, good having you by. Thanks for this.
All the best, John.
Premier Brad Wall in Charlottetown. Okay.